All right, we now have joining us on the Soccer Hour. It is Kylen Mills. Of course, you know her with her play-by-play work for Pac-12 Network, and now, of course, she is part of the San Jose Earthquakes Apple TV team. She's putting out content with Carlos Eustace and Chris Dangerfield. They've already been very impressive in their lead up to game number one. I know they've already been getting praise from other teams on the subreddits, on social media. Kylen, what's going on? How are you doing?
Good, not much. How are you, Ted? Really excited to be here talking soccer. Like, it's always crazy to me when the season sneaks up on you in February and you're like, oh, it's here. But it's super exciting and exciting to be a part of this Apple TV team. The new deal, I think, has been great for the league. And just looking around and seeing all the content teams are creating is a lot of
Mhm.
fun.
No, it is for sure. And, I think everybody was wondering, how this was going to segue from a grand idea into an actual application. And it's been pretty cool so far. Like I've, just been sitting around and be like, okay, what is Houston putting out? What is NYCFC putting out? Just to go check it out. And, you get the different riffs that all these teams are doing. So I've definitely enjoyed that. Let's talk a little bit about what you guys are doing with the Earthquakes. I know that in the first episode you guys talked tactics, you talked storylines. Like it was, again, for 20 minutes, very much wide ranging and very detailed. And I'm not hating on anybody else, but it was noted that you guys did a lot more than a lot of what other teams were doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cool. The Earthquakes, first of all, have put the resources into this, which is the number one thing. And I think just when you're launching a new product, you just don't know. There's been kind of a wide range in what every team has been doing based on the specifications that they were given. And the Earthquakes have gone above and beyond. They've, gone a level up from what
Mhm.
is being required. And I think that's great because at the end of the day, you're giving fans that extra experience with the MLS season pass to get that extra analysis. And that's one thing a couple people commented me about. It's great, so great that we have Chris Dangerfield, part of the team, because as you know, he's been covering the team. He's been an analyst for years. He knows so much about the history of the earthquakes. So he automatically just brings that extra layer of knowledge, which has been really cool. But one thing a lot of people commented to me about was just getting that extra layer of analysis that you don't necessarily get and they didn't necessarily see in some of the other teams when they were just doing a couple minute preview. So it's been really cool to see the Earthquakes really invest in this, and we're putting a lot of time, effort, resources. I'm going to be out at media day. We're possibly going to be shooting some stuff for our next show and just kind of doing some interviews with players. So it's really going to be your one-stop shop place to get everything Earthquakes, and the team is putting a lot of stock into it, which I think is cool. It's really cool to see for the fans. They're doing a good job of really, trying to put the team in the spotlight and creating some quality content on Apple TV. And I think it's great.
What's really interesting is that baseball in particular seems to be preparing for the end of the regional sports network. And I think that's something that's going to obviously impact other teams and other sports. And, we're going to see this happen across the entire North American landscape of sports. And they're going to be looking at the work that everybody at Apple TV and MLS is doing to prepare for this big transition. You're kind of on the vanguard of what's going to most likely be the norm. Like that's got to be a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, I just think the chance to be a part of this project, I jumped on it absolutely off the top because I do think this is the direction that a lot of sports broadcasts are going to be going. And you see Apple TV is expanding their team as well. I think they may be looking ahead into the future. You've got Amazon getting involved now in different sports broadcasts. So I do think that some of these streaming networks are going to be the future. And you see now how popular they are, just across Netflix. And you look at all the different applications that are out there. Now, I've been watching US women's national team games on my HBO Max app on
Yeah.
my, smart TV. So I do think it's the way of the future. I know you mentioned just what some of the regional networks are in trouble. And, you mentioned with baseball, the future is very uncertain. And I do think that this is an area where we're going to see more streaming services taking on sports broadcasts. So yeah, it's great to be on the forefront. I think it's great the MLS launched this deal now because now is the time to be moving forward in that direction. And I think at the end of the day, it'll be great for fans because people use streaming networks now, that's the way of the future versus cable, unfortunately. And, or fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. But, I think that this is a great direction to be going in for the MLS. And, I think that we're going to see more of it in the future in sports broadcasting.
Let's look at game number one for the San Jose Earthquakes. My ultimate take about the game, and this is not a blanket statement for the entire season, but where they are right now, in my opinion, it was like, you know what? If they were a fully actualized good team, they'd be able to get a point there or maybe even the win, which means they have a lot of room to grow. That said, I was very encouraged by what I saw. And maybe come September, they are able to win a game like that in a hostile environment on the road. It's just like they're still not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I think what we saw was a strong quality of play for 80 minutes or 80 plus minutes, however you want to look at it. I thought the Earthquakes played really well. I like the style of play that Luchi Gonzalez has rolled out. I mean, I like the first half. They held their line really high, they were pressing really high. To me, one thing that stood out is I thought the team looked gassed a little bit at the end of the first half, and then again at the end of the second. So I do think that's a factor as well, is just you mentioned being in a hostile environment. You've got a 3 hour time difference, you're traveling cross country. You add in the fact that it's the first match of the season, not everyone's in that game shape you're going to see mid-season. So I think some of those factors definitely have to be included when you look at how they play. And then just the ability to close out games simply is something that I think is going to come for this team, but that's something that has to be learned. And I know I mentioned to you before we went on, Ted, like looking back to last season, it kind of gave a little bit of PTSD maybe for some fans, and just that, they also seem to give up late goals quite a bit. And I think that we saw a vast improvement. Now it's just getting over that little hump of being able to close out those last few minutes, really being able to tighten up defensively. And it's also frustrating when you see those 2 goals being given up on set pieces. You're just like, oh, they didn't even give up a goal really in the run of play. I mean, so I just think that there are a lot of positives moving forward, but it does seem like they have to get over the hump. But this is a team that we could see a couple months from now closing out these games in these exact situations under Luchi Gonzalez. They're going to need a little bit more time. They're just coming off preseason. It's
Mhm.
still so early, but I thought the quality of play was really promising.
And a big part of that quality of play to me was their defensive structure. And I think it's really interesting to note that, the 2 goals off of set pieces in stoppage time. I mean, that's Thiago Almada. He's on Argentina in the World Cup for a reason.
Yeah.
He had moments of brilliance. And the Earthquakes, though, throughout the entirety of the game in open play, they shuttled Atlanta off to the sides. They couldn't work up the interior. They had to go to the wings. I think Daniel only had to make one save until he got to those points in stoppage time, which was like a low shot from, I believe, Almada. I don't remember off the top of my head, but to me, like that points that it's all headed in the right direction. Like it wasn't even like a bend don't break mentality. It was Atlanta was having trouble creating opportunities in the final third that weren't from the wings. And if you're looking at what you needed in terms of a stark improvement from a year ago, I mean, that was it. That was the evidence. I think that's why there is so much promise out of that first game, and why, even though, like you said, there is a little PTSD, you do feel good about what you saw.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing that stood out to me. I thought the defensive shape was vastly different than 1 year ago in a positive way. You saw players tucking in and really, keeping the field compact. And like you mentioned, just not letting Atlanta easily get up right down the spine, right down the center of the field. And that's what you want to see defensively. And that's one thing I noticed. Even it started up top with, you saw Cade Cowell and Christian Espinosa. When they lost the ball, they were pressing, but when it was clear that Atlanta United had possession, they were tucking in, they were getting back, and even they were involved in that defensive shape, and trying to just make it difficult for Atlanta to run right up the middle. And you're absolutely right. That's what you're looking for. That's what you want to see. And that's where I think that Luchi Gonzalez's coaching experience, especially in the MLS, right? Because that's one thing. Matias Almeida had so much experience in other international leagues, but it didn't necessarily translate to the style of play within the MLS. And I think Luchi Gonzalez clearly has a good grasp on what defensive game plan is going to work in this league. And based on what I saw, I thought it was just much, much improved from last season. The defensive shape looked much better. You've got a couple of new pieces also in the back line, Carlos Grueso right in front of the back line. So I think that all of that was moving in a positive direction. You give up 2 set-piece goals late in extra time. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, you almost can live with that, because you saw in the run of play a big improvement that hopefully they can build on moving forward.
Let's talk about that back line. Obviously, we got to see Trauco, Acapo subbed on later on, Rodriguez and Mensah in the middle, and then Paul Marie, who's just doing his consistent game that he has for so long. But, to me, the back line looked like they were still learning each other, but I think that mostly I was pretty pleased with what I saw. What was your take?
Yeah, I thought the back line looked solid. I thought it looked solid. I mean, to me, one thing that stood out was early in the game, that goal in the 13th minute. Rodriguez has, really great composure on the ball. He initiated that play, was able to
Mhm.
bring it up and take on, one, two, up to three defenders before delivering that diagonal ball cross field. So, number one, I thought that was just great to see a threat, of a player who's in that center back position who does have that composure to get the ball forward and potentially break lines. As far as the actual, I think there definitely is going to be a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to communication, learning how each other plays in the back line, the
Mhm.
organization factor. That's always so crucial, and it's not going to be perfect in the first game. But I think we saw a good, solid basis. Again, I do think though that we're going to see improvements as well, just due to fitness. I thought that maybe towards the end of the game, I think it was it Trauco who went down and possibly had some type of calf cramp or something like that
Yeah.
late in the game. And that's where you're going to see. I think that there were some tired legs towards the end defensively. We saw them kind of starting to really tuck in and try to fend Atlanta United FC off as we got into that extra time. But I do think the back line looked good. I thought that, it was once again just a big improvement from a year ago. And there is going to be a little bit of a learning curve when you're learning how to play with each other when you've got new players in a back line. But I just thought that overall they were pretty cohesive. They kept their shape well. They didn't give up any easy opportunities. You mentioned them forcing Atlanta United to the outside, exactly what you want to do. They didn't allow really any easy opportunities. As you mentioned, Danielle
Mhm.
didn't have to make any crazy saves, throughout the course of the game. And that's ultimately what you want. So I think it's a great basis. And then it's only going to get better because to me, like the chemistry in the back line is so important. The communication is so important. And, they only have preseason under their belt. So it's only going to get better.
One of the interesting things about Carlos Gruezo is that in this game, we didn't really talk about him a whole lot, but it's almost like Atlanta made a very concerted effort to stay aware from where he was, or stay away from where he was occupying the pitch. That to me, if a player has that kind of gravitational, not pull, but push, that is a huge factor for the rest of the defense and how they're going to set up. Gruezo obviously had some tired legs, but what did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I thought Grayso was excellent. I mean, I think you mentioned occupying the space, and that's the most important thing. He was in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
It seemed like at all times throughout the game, and you force the opponent to be aware of you at all times. It's absolutely going to make a huge difference. I thought he covered the space well, and you mentioned some tired legs, but at that six role, you're just looking for a ball winner. You're looking for a connector. You want a player who's going to be strong out there. I mean, I just thought he showed all the attributes that you really look for typically in a six. And to me, just such a huge advantage to having Grueso there is the ability to free up Jackson Ewell. I thought the play of Jackson Ewell was a direct result of Carlos Grueso doing a good job of
Mhm.
occupying that space in the six and really playing so well in front of that defensive line. And so to me, there's a domino effect, and not just Grueso. I thought played well; he did his job. But then, I thought we saw a lot more positives from Jackson Ewell, and his ability to distribute is just incredible. And that's something that I don't know. I feel like he just wasn't quite there last season. And I really think it does make a huge difference knowing that you have a player like Carlos Grueso playing in front of the back line who's going to hold that space down so well. I thought we had a couple of really great balls from Jackson Ewell that, maybe you don't see a year ago when he does well. A year ago, he was starting at center back. So that's a whole different story. But seeing him be freed up a little bit in that eight role in the midfield, I thought it made a huge difference for him having Grueso. So then, like I said, you kind of have a domino effect in how that middle three works together. And I think Grueso played really well, and I'm really excited to see what we end up getting from Jackson Ewell this season because I thought he was a little bit limited last year, and now I think that his ability to be freed up a little is really exciting.
He was asked to do so much last year. I mean, that's like you alluded to. He started the year as a center
Yeah.
back, and then the way that they ran the midfield, it was having him cover a lot of ground, and his responsibilities were numerous. I'm excited to see, him with his role a little bit more defined this year. I thought the attack was pretty well defined and that they were going through Espinosa on the right wing oftentimes. That looked like the connection with him and Abobasi picked up right where it left off. And that was the thing to me is that Abobasi and Espinosa, they didn't look like they were in game one form. They looked like they were ready to go. And so that to me is really, really encouraging because last year it took Abobasi a few games to get rolling. It took Espinosa a little bit to get rolling, especially after Espinosa had a 2021 that I know he wasn't happy with. And then 2022, once he got rolling, he, ended up with 14 assists and a single season record. So, to watch them be that in sync and have that connection in game one, for me, that speaks volumes.
Yeah, I thought the chemistry was outstanding. I thought, like you mentioned, they all looked ready, and that's a big reason why the Earthquakes came out in that front foot. Like the way they came out, really applying a lot of pressure up top, and that was one thing that stood out to me as well. As maybe a change under Lucci Gonzalez. It seemed like they were working really hard defensively as well, and just applying a lot of pressure, holding that line really high. So that was exciting to see. And then you mentioned the chemistry bit. I thought was huge. I thought, and Kate Cowell did a good job as well, but especially you mentioned Christian Espinosa and Jeremy Abobasi just doing a good job. And it seemed like they were just really in sync as far as reading runs, getting into different spaces. You saw Christian Espinosa on one of the Quakes' best scoring opportunities get to the end line. It was Kate Cowell who made like a hard diagonal cutting run towards the near post, and Jeremy Abobasi just kind of read the play well,
Mhm.
lingered, drifted towards the back post, got into a passing lane, and Christian Espinosa found him perfectly, just kind of wide open around just past the penalty spot. And I just thought they did such a good job of working off each other, varying their runs. It looked very fluid. You're crossing, you're crossing, and that's exactly what you want from a front line. That makes it much tougher for a back line to defend when you're constantly having to communicate, figure out when you're passing off that attacking player, figure out when you're following that attacking player. And I thought the three of them did work well together, but specifically Espinosa and Abobasi, it looked like you said, absolutely had that good connection and picked up right where they left off. I think that front three is going to be really exciting to see. And, looking back at last season, they did find some success. And
Mhm.
so I think that's a really great piece for the Quakes to build on, because that is a group that is now played together for a season versus we were just talking about, some of the players in the back line are new. It's still going to take some more time to build that chemistry. The front three, I think we saw exactly what we were looking for, is that they picked up where they left off. They had, it just seemed like great cohesion and were really able to apply a lot of pressure early. So, hopefully that trend can continue.
Last one for you. What are you hoping to see on Saturday in Vancouver? Like, what, if you're primarily focused on one thing you want to see from the Earthquakes from game one to game two, what is that?
Okay, that's a good question. So I want to see them come out the same way they came out against Atlanta United FC. And this Vancouver team, also a team that has a lot to prove. They're looking to build off some late season success from last season. And for me, I think it's important the Quakes come in and really establish themselves and, take the air out the ball or air out the room. I'm not sure what the proper take the air out the room, whatever the proper phrasing might be, but I think they want to get a goal early. And that's something that they executed well last game. And I think they need to come out with that high energy style. I just think it makes such a huge difference. I like the high line for the attack. I like the high pressure. Clearly, they were trying to get forward in transition as well and really push when they won the ball back. And with the speed the Quakes have and some of those players up top across the field, like I think that they can really exploit that if they continue to look to play the transition game. We talked about the fluidity up top, but I liked the defensive pressure starting with the front three all the way back through. And I think if the Quakes come out playing that high energy, playing that attacking style, playing, with a lot of defensive pressure, it's going to be hard for teams to be able to weather that right from kickoff. I think if they come out and establish themselves with that energy right from kickoff, it's going to, put them in a good position moving forward in the game. Similar to how it did in Atlanta United. I like that they got on the board first in their season opener. And now you're looking at a home opener. You've got the crowd on your side this time. You're eating your home cooking. You don't have all the other travel and, other factors of playing a game in a stadium full of 67,000 fans cheering
Right.
against you. Now, can they jump on this game early in the same way, but then can they close it out, a little bit better in the second half and close it out for 3 points? That's what I'm looking for.
I don't know if there's a release schedule on the Apple TV stuff. I don't know if you know either, but I think the best way for people to follow when it's coming out is probably to follow you on social, because I'm sure you're making people aware. So where should they be following you on social media?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, follow the Quakes on social media. They're going to be posting every day, like when new content is being posted. They're going to be sharing that on their social media pages. Myself, Carlos Eustace, Chris Dangerfield will also be sharing on our personal social media pages. I'm easy to find because I have an easy name. So it's just at Kylen Mills, Twitter, Instagram, same thing, just journalist Kylen Mills on Facebook. So you can give me a follow. We'll be posting that. And every single week, we're going to be posting brand new content, which again, I just think is the really cool thing. If you are an Earthquakes fan or an MLS fan, a soccer fan in general, it's worth it to get the MLS season pass. You can take a look at what teams are producing across the league. You want to learn more about the Whitecaps? Go ahead on there, watch their season preview. I watched it. I thought, they did a good job. The league is also producing content, and Apple TV is producing content. So there were a couple shows on there where you were able to really look at, season previews across the league. So it's just really cool. If you're a soccer fan in general, you can find a lot on the Apple TV MLS season pass. we'll be producing Quakes content every single week, interviews. Like I said, we're going to have that weekly show continuing that you saw in week one. And so, it's totally worth it to log in, subscribe, and we'll be posting on social media when we're getting stuff up there.
Awesome, Kylen. Well, I'm very happy that we've been able to pull you into the Earthquakes family. I look forward to seeing you today. Full disclosure, this is Wednesday morning. You'll be hearing this Wednesday night. We're doing a media day thing next. And then I assume I'll see you Saturday, right?
Absolutely. Yep. Looking forward to it, Ted. And we'll see you in a bit. But again, just everyone subscribe to MLS Season Pass because there's going to be a lot of great content coming down the pipe.